Hey, GTN News listeners, thanks for tuning to this week's episode. This week's episode, I'm pulling a conversation I had with Balaji about owned media. You might remember a couple months back, we had a more in-depth conversation about owned media. And this episode, he actually brought a bunch of really additional insights that we weren't able to cover in our last conversation. And owned media is just probably one of the most interesting and important topics for go-to-market in general, and versus renting or paying for the media and the access to your audience. You build it yourself, you own the access, ultimately taking those folks through a journey to becoming customers through a media aspect. So let's jump right into my conversation with Balaji. Hope you enjoy this week's episode. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming on. And first of all, I want to thank you for manning the Q&A in the chat today. This new format of event, I'm still trying to figure out how to integrate the audience better since it's such a fast-paced event. And so I appreciate you commenting and engaging there. But I wanted you to wrap us up. First, you've been on my podcast. We've talked about owned media and this concept that's been really popularized over the last couple of years. So lay it out for us. What are you seeing as, first, why owned media? And then maybe some takeaways on how folks can get started.
Of course.
Okay.
So this idea of owned media, I think we're all very familiar with the term, and yet we might not be that familiar with how it's relevant to us. So we're familiar with the concepts of paid media, very familiar thanks to Google and other vendors. We're familiar with, we might have heard rented media. That's what's become very popular in the past 6-7 years with social media properties, where you have an audience on their platform, but you don't necessarily own all the keys to the car, so to speak, or all the access to your audience. So it's been really interesting to figure out how owned media plays into that space. Several of the speakers today actually gave examples of owned media. Casey from Active Campaign talked about B2B newsletters, which is one very key piece or example of owned media. I'm going to speak about a very specific type of owned media, if you will. I'm going to speak about creating shows, and not just any shows, but serial shows, binge-worthy shows, like deliciously binge-worthy, okay? The type of shows that keep you up late at night, watching after your spouse has gone to sleep. Don't do that. Don't try this at home, kids. But this is what we want to talk about today. All right, I think my presentation is up.
Yep, I can see it. Looks great.
Perfect. So here's the challenge that we have. A lot of us have been in this B2B marketing game for a number of years, but the ground has shifted under our feet. The old way no longer works. Blogs, even search engine results pages, like Brendan talked about SEO just a moment ago, ad clicks, traffic, driving traffic to your website, all this stuff. These were tried and true plays. Those plays no longer work like they used to. They're not dead, but they're kind of atrophying on the vine, okay? And by the way, I will share this presentation with Taylor. So you guys can take screenshots, but I'll give you the whole presentation so you have all of the details. We're essentially, as marketers, being forced to evolve, Taylor, our B2B content. It's no longer enough to simply publish the most content, okay? Anybody who's got AI could keep up with your volume. It's not enough to even be the most helpful, right? Google and ChatGPT are helpful now is just a commodity. It's not even enough to have the best product features, because almost any technical features that you might have can be duplicated within 6 months. And even content discoverability has plummeted. Back in the day, Google was a great source of traffic. Social networks were a great source of traffic. Now, if you put a link in your social network post, you get penalized for it. You get the slap. So we have to evolve the way that we create and think about B2B content. Now, there's several examples that are actually working in this new world of B2B content. And these are a number of them on here. I screen captured something I saw on LinkedIn posted by Chris Walker today. Many of us will be familiar with Chris Walker of Refine Labs. He posted a comment that someone sent to him, and the language jumped out to me. This individual said, "Chewing through your content right now like a Netflix binge," pardon the typo there, "and love everything you stand for." So some people are starting to figure this thing out, but it's very, very early days still. And just like there was an SEO gold rush back in the day, there's a lot of green space. There's a lot of opportunity for figuring out how to create this binge-worthy serial content. What Taylor is doing right now is an example of binge-worthy serial content. So we're going to get a little bit into the qualities of what makes for good owned media. So ideally, you want it to be subscription-based. This is not something where you are tricking people to opt in or give you their email address for an ebook and then you lead nurture them into oblivion. We're not doing that. This is a subscription based. It's serial consumption. So one-off content is fine. One-off content is sometimes necessary. But in this case, a lot of the guests or speakers have talked about how attention spans are dropping. We want something that's going to hold attention, right? And so rather than starting to spin the wheel every single time from scratch, we want something that will give us this sort of increasing snowball effect, right? We want a situation where you own the relationship, okay? We don't want LinkedIn to own it or Facebook to own it. And finally, you want it to be audience-centric, not brand-centric. Taylor is so good about focusing us, centering us on give us some tips that are good, but also give us some of the things to avoid. Don't create product-centric content when you are thinking about owned media. You need product-centric content in your whole mix, but for your owned media specifically, we want it to be audience-centric, okay? So those are some qualities. All right, let's give you guys some tangible examples. If you're trying to plan your own binge-worthy B2B content series, here's some steps you could take. I want you to research your ICP. And I know you've already done the persona work and you've got binders and Bibles and folders and all this good stuff. I want you to do it anew. One of the reasons I love podcasting, for example, Rachel talked about B2B podcasts, is that it is secretly, quietly, maybe the best way to get insight into what your ideal customer is obsessing about, what they're worried about, what keeps them up at night. Because it's conversational. You're almost putting a spotlight on your ICP by putting them into that other chair and allowing them to shine. But while they do so, they're also revealing some of their insecurities. They're revealing where they need help. So that's the type of research that I want you to go do anew. After you've done 10 or 20 of those, you're going to start to be able to piece together, wow, these are some of the real pain points. I want you to make a manifesto out of that. Anybody remember the Think Different campaign from Apple? You guys remember that? Here's to the crazy ones. I want you to start thinking, let me take my customers' language, their pain point language, and put it all together in something that's going to not only spotlight them, but tell them, you know what? You're not rallying around my brand. I'm rallying around you. All I'm doing is I'm just the flag bearer. I'm the flag bearer to say, if you struggle with these issues, this is the flag. We're mad as hell, and we're not going to take it anymore. I want you to get riled up and rile your audience up, because in that anger, in that pain, in that frustration, that's where you have the brand affinity. That's where you have the makings of a movement, right? When you do that sort of stuff, and then you start to curate your taste, right? I'll give some examples in my show of how I've included my maybe very esoteric, very peculiar tastes into the show. When you start to do that, that will then inform the show that comes out. It's going to be audience-based, but it's going to be in your voice. That makes sense? Cool. All right, so let's get into a specific example. This is a show that I created over the past year called Demand Wars. I've been in demand marketing or demand generation for B2B over the past 15 years. I've gone through all kinds of hell and back, and I'm not the only one. A lot of people working in demand generation right now are going through some of the toughest times they have as professionals because the expectations are just completely unrealistic. The top-down forecasts, especially for people working in smaller companies where they have this venture capital investment, it's just ridiculous. And yet people are burning the candle at both ends trying to make it work. I've dug into that pain to say, you know what, B2B marketing as we do it today is broken. We got to find a different way or die trying. Welcome to the Rebel Alliance. So if you've been suffering out there, it's not just you, it's us. People like us are mad as hell, and we're going to do something about it. Okay, so let me sort of show you all the ingredients that I just threw these things in there. You're going to see elements of Survivor. The Apprentice, Hunger Games, Star Wars, American Idol, and one basketball mixtapes, and more. This is ridiculous. Like, who, combine all those things? And yet, all of those elements are familiar, but I'm mixing them in a way that creates something new. You guys write this acronym down, MAYA. Most advanced, yet acceptable. You want something that is newer than what we've seen, and yet it's close enough to the norm that we can relate to it. When Taylor said this 9 and 9 series is going to be the TikTok of B2B, come on. Already, when he says that, you're like, oh, I get TikTok. It's quick, it's edgy, it's fast-paced, it's value, it's entertaining, but he's tweaked it 1 degree by bringing it into B2B marketing and giving us all 9 minutes. Speaking of 9 minutes, I'm running out of my time. I got to keep it moving. All right, so I have 24 contestants. These are some of your favorite B2B marketers. Come on, Obed Durrani, we got everybody in here. And I actually told them, okay, this is going to feel like a podcast. I'm going to interview you like this is a podcast on the back end. On the front end, it's going to look nothing like a podcast. So they were like, I don't get it, but I trust you. I've got a relationship with you. You've been publishing on LinkedIn for the X number of years. What the heck? I'll give this crazy thing a try. And so I interviewed all these people, and they put their faith in me, having no idea what the show was going to look like. I then divided them all into tribes. So you can see, if you read left to right, the first row is the Mastermind tribe. Then we've got the Charger tribe, then the Alchemists, and then the Defenders. It's starting to feel a little Survivor-ish, right? So these are the tribes, and it's actually kind of based on like personalities, who's an introvert versus an extrovert, who's strategic versus relational, which demand tribe are you? The audience can almost put themselves into the contestant's shoes. When you watch Survivor and you instantly identify with 1 or 2 of the contestants, and then you've got like the villains that you can't stand. That's what we're trying to recreate here. No offense to anyone who was viewed as a villain in this show. I apologize. So for the 24 contestants, we are creating stakes. From 24 players, we're going all the way down to 1. And this was interesting to me because I knew whenever my family and I watch a reality show, the stakes help us to understand what's important, help us to understand, we need to care about this thing. There's some money that they can win at the end, and people are getting voted off like flies. My challenge was, as a creator, starting off, not having sponsors, not having a budget, I didn't really have a lot of the, we're going to give you $10,000 or whatever. And yet I built the plane after takeoff. I'm like, okay, I'm going to work this thing out as we go. Taylor made a point when he talked about virtual events, and he said, don't just do one-offs. He said, do a series, ideally maybe monthly. And he said, in month 6, something's going to click from all the mistakes you made in months 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've been building this thing in public. It's at times been painful. It's at times been thrilling, but I'm learning along the way. And I'm going to tell you, you're not going to have everything figured out at the very beginning. Start anyway. Okay, so these are some examples. We've got 4 episodes out right now. This is sort of an example of, you can see sort of the branding, and I'm going to talk about this in just a minute when we start to visualize your show. But I created very specific branding, almost like apocalyptic, cyberpunk, fantasy fiction. I'm starting to inject things I grew up reading way too much. C.S. Lewis and Lord of the... I apologize, folks. I apologize. You're going to have to tolerate that. But I'm injecting my persona, my personality into the show. All right? So... I want to spend a little bit of time on this, Taylor, and then we can maybe talk through it. This is like, I'm opening the vault for you guys on this one, okay? You want to create a deliciously binge-worthy B2B series, like some of your favorites from Netflix, from Amazon Prime, from Hulu. I'll tell you one that I'm binging right now. A friend, Ronnie Higgins, put me onto this, The Expanse on Amazon Prime. It's 6 seasons. I actually watched it months ago. After one episode, I couldn't get into it. He told me, go back. It's a slow burn. Try it again. I'm now on season 5. I can't put this thing down. How do they make these things so deliciously binge-worthy? Number 1, make it category adjacent. It's like X, but different. We're almost going to think about this like, because we're using the word delicious, we're going to think about this like a restaurant experience. So this is like picking a restaurant genre. What do you feel like eating today, Taylor? Oh, I feel like Chinese. Oh, I feel like going to a Brazilian steakhouse. That's where it starts. People start by picking categories. So when I tell people about Demand Wars, I say it's Survivor meets Hunger Games. Boom, category. Immediately, that puts you in a certain frame. If you were never into Survivor or Hunger Games, you tune out. But guess what? That's okay because I don't want to waste your time. It's not going to be interesting to you. Category adjacent, number one. Number two, you got to have a hook. That's the title. It's the branding. Think of the hook as, what the delicious meal looks like at your favorite restaurant. Anytime I go to Cheesecake Factory, one of my favorite restaurants and my wife's favorite restaurant, man, their menu is way too big. But have you noticed how your eyes might gravitate towards some of the menu items that have photographs in them, right? We want to be able to hook people instantly just off of them seeing our show and seeing what it's about. That's the hook. Okay, number three, premise. In the movie business, they call this a log line. All right, I'm getting fancy on you guys here. But it's basically the premise. This is like a one-line description. Think about when the waiter walks up. I've never been a waiter before, but the really good waiters, they'll walk up and they'll tell you, oh, the soup of the day, we've got the asparagus with this and that, oh, and the fish and the creme brulee. And man, it's like, I don't know what you're saying, dude, but I want two of them. Like, that sounds good. How can you, in one sentence, describe your premise in a way that's going to be compelling to your ideal audience? All of this is like a secret key for your ideal audience. Or to anybody outside of the audience, it might be gibberish. That's okay. You might almost even want that. But to those people on the inside, when I tell somebody who's been in demand generation, B2B marketing is broken, the look of recognition that they get in their eyes, they give me that head nod like, yeah, I feel you. I feel you. So you got to learn that internal language. Okay, social proof. You almost want to secure distribution ahead of time. This is one of the ones that I sort of stumbled with the first couple of episodes, but that's okay because we're building in public. Think about a restaurant that you go to that has a line outside the restaurant. It almost doesn't matter what food they're serving. You're like, they look like they got it going on. Like, I need to go, let's go check them out. So you want to secure your distribution, at least think about it, plan it out before you actually launch the show. Okay, great. Now, the trailer, that's self-explanatory. That's like the smell, the anticipation of the meal. We got to have a 30-second trailer that really tells the story. It shows the peaks and the valleys, the highs and the lows. You got to have characters. Taylor talked about the importance of getting good guests. This is the same thing. You don't want everyone. It's tough. Actually, can I share this between friends? I have friends in the industry that I did not invite to come onto my show. They're brilliant people, but I needed, if we go back to those tribes, I needed a good mix of extroverted people, of controversial opinions, of insightful people. You got to get that mix. And I've noticed that a lot of these reality shows, they have casting departments. Sometimes you'll wonder, good Lord, why do they keep getting these? There's always like one or two wacky, zany people on Survivor. Like, why do you even have them in there? They did that on purpose. You got to have heroes, villains, allies, mentors, shapeshifter. You got to have it all. All right. Then you want to have a hero saves the cat moment. This is actually a book. It's a thing in Hollywood. I hope I'm not ruining movies for you now, but whenever you watch a movie, watch the protagonist. In the first couple of minutes, they're going to save the cat. Sometimes literally, often it's figuratively. They're doing something generous, altruistic. It makes you care about the character. So how do you do that in a show? The way that I actually did that, if you go watch Demand Wars, you'll notice that I introduce, and this is so funny because Taylor, you talked about intros and how, they're not really a value add in most cases. And you're 100% right. I flipped that on its head. And I said, I'm going to make these people the star of the show. This is where the And One mixtapes come. So if you ever watch an And One mixtape, go to YouTube. There's a DJ, and that DJ is on the microphone. And the DJ is going crazy about all the plays and all the players. And it adds to the excitement. I put that as my intros into the show, so much so that the intros might have become like a star of the show. I didn't anticipate that, But that was just one of the many ingredients that I threw in. You're going to throw some things in that will bomb. You throw a lot of things in that nobody will ever mention, and then a couple of things that you throw in will take off. You want to double down on those. And so now every episode, people are commenting about the intros. Go figure. Couple more stakes development. I talked about stakes earlier. So what does the hero have to gain? In this case, we want a prize. And what do they have to lose? You could get kicked off. You could get embarrassed publicly in front of your peers. It's not good, folks. It's not good. And then finally, we want a shared experience. What's the good of binging a show on Netflix if you're binging alone? It's way more fun to binge with friends. These are some elements of a deliciously binge-worthy B2B series. And I dare say your audience deserves this from you. They deserve more than just ebooks. They deserve more than just research. They deserve more than just webinars. Thank you, Tim.
Balaji, thank you so much for coming on, and great insights. I learned a ton. I'm going to rewatch, everyone's, but definitely please share this presentation with me. I'll share with the audience. I know we're up on time. Thanks again for coming on, Balaji. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, folks, we are all done. We've had a packed full over hour and a half here. Thanks for all the folks that have listened, all of our speakers that shared. I learned a ton. We'll share this recording with everyone afterwards, so check your email so you can rewatch it, share with your teams. Expect more of these 9-9 events moving forward. We'll definitely reach out to get your feedback, too, on how we can make these events better. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Appreciate your time. Take care.
Let me
Zoodle just there we go.
Can you hear me now?
How are we doing?
Fantastic.
I can't. Zoodle's really weird.